of our website, which is definitely not authorized. I mean, they just are there.
They just,
Right.
yeah,
No
they're
one-
in the public, they go
Right,
to
they're
a
just like
website.
visitors, right?
Right, but what I'm trying to think of is, because I don't know that the policy would cover users of the website, though, necessarily. So that's where I was trying to come up with, who would be, because even like guests, when they come in, we authorize them to use our network. I think-
Under the district website, it says users shall not copy or download information from the district website and disseminate it, so that might catch a broader population than the authorized users who have a connection to, as being a student or an employee.
And here, under authority, users shall have no expectation of privacy. That could be an authorized user or just any user, right? And so it's, whether you're authorized or not, you should not have an expectation of privacy, right? And so I think there is a meaningful difference, but I think that it would be worthwhile to go through and make sure that it's being used consistently, right?
Yeah, I think because there's language saying that there's a process for, like there's a lead administrator who'd be notified by request. So there's sort of this implication of authorization at some level.
I think.
I don't know if there's any meaningful difference though.
I think that the point of going through and making sure we use the term authorized user throughout the policy, wherever that's the case, I think
Yeah.
is the easy
Yeah.
solution
Right.
to that.
And it definitely won't be everywhere, but potentially more than where it's being used right now.
And then in the security section of the policy, I have two comments. One was, I think when I got to this point in the policy, I expected that the security was going to describe some responsibility of the district to maintain safeguards. This is more on the behaviors of users. And so wondered if our policy wants to include security expectations, that the district employs or provides to our network and things. And then I had a question about, it says employees and students shall not reveal their passwords to another individual. And I wondered, like, for our littlest students, do they have passwords? And so are they, like, as a
I do.
mom, you're not supposed to know it? Like, I'm just
Oh.
like, how applicable is that? Like,
That's a good point.
or, how are we to interpret that? If it's like passwords and family members have access to it, is that a violation? Are there other concerns that come up if a grown-up is seeing classroom postings or something like that?
Yeah, obviously the intent behind it was that high school kids aren't sharing their password with their friend and things like that,
Right.
obviously. I'm trying to think how we could, like, within the policy, maybe address the carve out for family members, or something like that.
Or even just
Obviously-
say like a guardian,
Yeah,
right?
yeah. And to the security discussion, I think, a lot of that, like, we wouldn't want to list anything particular or specific within that as far as what we do. It does somewhere else, and I'm drawing a blank on where exactly it is. It does speak to the fact that we put protective measures in place to kind of limit the content that students can access, or network users can access in general. I'm also thinking back to, Justin mentioned policy 830. I know that talks in general about breach notification and securing PII and those kinds of things. I don't know that it goes into specifics about any of those controls, but.
This might just be a place where we would want to cross-reference some of those other policies that we appreciate that the security of our system is both the responsibility of individual users and of the district to provide a safe framework for this.
I was just going to add that I think the impetus for the lens being what obligations are on the user is because it is the district's acceptable use policy. So point well made, though, to the cross-reference to 830, and I think we said this earlier, that was going to be added. But as far as generally speaking, why the focus is so much on what the user has to do
Right.
rather than what the district's providing, that's the reason why.
So this is always a hard thing to kind of wade into, but I appreciate the language around trying to define what obscenity is. I understand it's the Miller test. However, if any of us were asked, like if we had something we were asked, I'm guaranteeing we'd have different answers from every single one of us. And that's the problem with the Miller test. So I am just curious. It's also, this is language, pornography, obscenity is language that is being weaponized right now across the country. So I, in particular, weaponized against the queer community. So I am hesitant here, just only in the sense of like, I don't know what the practices are within the district of if something is deemed to be obscene. Who's the person making that decision? Given all of us might come up with a different answer. Is that an administrator? Does that case come to the board? So let's give a scenario of a student utilizes AI, puts something in their report that the teacher is disturbed by and is concerned by. And the teacher is saying, this is something that I find obscene. For whatever reason in their life and their perspectives, they see it as obscenity. Where does that go? And what is the process of defining whether or not that truly is? But again, truly is means different for different opinions. So I'm just curious, Dr. Rushi or Ms. Saxka, do you know what would be the process of determining whether a student wrote in a report something that was deemed to be obscene?
Well, I think, Jen, jump in if there's anything, any more detail. What I believe the process to be is that teacher then brings that to the attention of maybe an assistant principal, if it's, somebody at the secondary level, or to the building principal. Depending on what is written, they may look to involve the guidance counselor as well. They may speak directly with the student, depending on the age, again, the age of the student. There could be a call to get the parent involved. I really believe that most of the work undertaken in our district around that is to try to learn more about the child. And it's not punitive, right? Like, that's not immediately where things go to. Now, excellent question. Who decides? Is it like, I'm offended, so I therefore decide that it's obscene? We've not had anything rise to that level that I'm aware of. I don't know if any of the teachers have brought anything to you.
No, I agree that is the process that we usually engage in. There is administrator involvement, and then, lots of questions and supports put in place. Sometimes there's the involvement of someone from pupil services, which can help sort of someone who knows several different cases and get a sense of how it's been handled in the district prior. But I agree, we have not seen something come to us that, has been a charge of obscenity that had to be dealt with in a punitive manner, in a way where there was any objection from the parent guardian or anything like that.
Great, so let me complicate it again more. What happens if a teacher brings in material that the teacher finds to be very educational and appropriate, but either the student or a parent of that student deems it to be obscene? What's the process then that is taken to evaluate that? If this is our policy and these are our conditions, I appreciate that it's all we've got law-wise, but it's still really ambiguous. So what is that process?
That process would then involve an administrator. That it would be, I would assume the parent would bring that to the attention of an administrator in the building. And then there's, review of materials. Is it something that the teacher brought in that's not, and it's an additional resource, but it's not part of the resource that we're providing for the curriculum? Then, conversations, what's being used, why. And we have had people question some materials that were used in the classroom. Jen's office has been involved in working with the teacher, and sometimes they stop using those resources. That has occurred.
So then that would apply not just to acceptable use of internet computers and, right, that is other materials, library books, things like that fall under there. But I think to Dr. McKay's point, like to understand the practices around that and the implications. I think when I read this section, again, like there are lots of ways somebody could use the internet to access very troubling and disturbing content. That should definitely be prohibited to students or in a workplace. I'm always surprised at the extent to which this language focuses on things that have any sexual nature to it, when there is also a broad range of other things. So that this is picked out as what is harmful to minors or obscene has a nexus with sexual content.
Absolutely, it doesn't have racism as one of the issues.
Yes.
That it could be seen as obscene, which I think is a problem with the Miller test, a significant problem with it. It is only focused in on sexual behavior.
So it raises a good issue. I don't know ways in which to help.
One thing I will
Verify it.
mention, we have developed probably in the last 5 years what we call a supplemental resource checklist that has been helpful for teachers that, we don't expect teachers to only use the materials that we have provided, right? It's also an art and they find those things. So it's a checklist that helps them sort of go through before I use this. Let me think through some things. And some of them include, is the material, and this again is subjective, but is it grade level appropriate when you consider all of the other material that is typically taught to students at this level? And we ask them to assess that themselves or ask their peers or consult our curriculum supervisors. How well prepared are you to anticipate and respond to questions? Have you thought about what communication might occur with families ahead of this, if at all, if necessary, or in following with it? How does it relate to the curriculum itself, right? Is it completely out of the, you just saw a poem you liked, or is this related to, we've been learning about this in social studies class? So there are probably, 15 things to think about, and then some support offered, like if you're still not sure, reach out and we'll help, talk to your principal and the curriculum folks, and we'll help make a decision together. And sometimes if the case is that it fits all those criteria, we can add them to potential resources that everyone can use. And so we've had that in place. We do, when we sign off on the acceptable use, it's one of the other things that we say, don't forget, sign off that you've seen the supplemental resource checklist again this year, so folks are aware of it. Again, I don't think there's any great answer, but it's one way we try to just sort of expand the thinking around these things to help, so folks don't find themselves sort of out there putting themselves on the line, making decisions where they're not sure how people are going to respond. We want them to feel supported.
I was just wondering, Dr. McKay, if a reference to harassment, I was just looking at the harassment policy, which talks about verbal, written, electronic, graphic, electronic would be probably applicable potentially with, based on race, color, age, creed, religion, et cetera.
It would make it more, I think it would make it a better tool,
More comprehensive.
more comprehensive than just this. Because it allows for things that can do harm in other ways. I don't necessarily need us to change it. I just want to acknowledge I'm really uneasy with this language. It makes me really nervous. But I also know we don't necessarily have a better answer. But just given how it's being weaponized across the country, it concerns me. We may not have had any cases yet to deal with, but as we're opening up AI, we may soon have further things to have to challenge. So thinking through what that process would be, and to have it not be punitive in relation to our students, but I'm also thinking about, as we're navigating this with our teachers, not having the initial response be punitive, that there's other ways for us to figure out, especially given this is new content with AI.
Mm-hmm.
So was the suggestion there to add harassment here or to add a reference to the harassment policy?
I don't know specifically what I was just looking that the harassment policy is a little bit broader than I think. I think Dr. McKay was saying in our, in this policy, the internet access policy is pretty limited to, you know, definitions of pornography.
Mm-hmm.
And so I don't know if we take language from the harassment policy and add it, or I don't know what the best solution would be. But I could imagine that AI could be used to generate images that are not pornographic, but may be harassing in nature.
Mhm.
Which I think is
Or,
public.
yeah, violent or
Mhm.
disturbing in some way that isn't here, but is not something that we want in our education.
And given the legal definition of obscenity does tend to be these 3 points in general, maybe we need to have it be in a separate section of, like, maybe something that is called harassment or a separate subheading, so that we don't add something in that's confusing, given that there is kind of the legal use of these 3 points.
Right.
And I'm trying to think too, whether there's something in here already about, violating our other policies.
The AR covers that,
Maybe we should put that in the policy.
just,
Include some, because, and we could even include a reference to the harassment policy or other policies that are similar, but to make sure that, you know, because here we talk about specifics. You can't do these specific things that would be considered obscene. Well, you also can't be violating our other policies, like it applies to your use of the internet, computers, and network resources, right?
Mhm. It might, I'm
Under
looking at.
prohibitions.
Yeah, like cyberbullying and bullying is listed there, and I
Mhm.
believe it links to the policies that we have around that specifically. Maybe adding another line in there that says harassment with a link to the harassment policy would kind of call that out without
Yeah.
having to.
Where is the cyberbullying? Sorry, I'm not seeing it.
Under
Under
the section, prohibitions.
Oh, it's down in the provisions, okay.
Yeah.
I wonder if there's benefit to putting something like bullying or harassment in the definitions section, because again, that's a term that is pretty loosely used. Given that we're taking the time and effort to define all these other things, if that would also just be helpful. Maybe that's a place that we put something around harassment or, I don't know, just an idea.
Put it on a similar standing.
Mm-hmm.
My other suggestion would be to look at the language in the purpose and maybe try to capture the concept that the digital platform is part of our school community and is held to similar standards, policies, right, that we experience in real life, in real interactions. But that may be another way to frame the intent that the communication, the behaviors that are exhibited online through use of the internet are held to the same expectations of how we otherwise relate to each other.
Mhm. Yeah, I think that's what I was trying to get at too. It's like all of our rules still apply,
Mhm.
right?
In the purpose statement, did you say?
Yeah, and the purpose is kind of the grounding of this, just to add a concept and framing that this is not meant to exist in a specific siloed context, but this is, the behaviors, the policy that governs the use of how people act on the internet is part of our broader school community.
Mhm.
And that might help with not needing to think we need to capture a whole set of very specific circumstances, but those connections to things that have been thought about in all the prior years of making guidelines for what's appropriate behavior.
So President Weedman, just so I'm clear, broaden the purpose to account for incorporation of all district rules, policies, regulations, et cetera. Do you want the additional definitions? Okay, so harassment, bullying, cyberbullying, discrimination.
And then have those, again, put into the prohibitions, so now they've been defined, and add a line in the prohibitions to them. And I think where, in the prohibitions is where we would have the footnotes linking our policies on each one.
Kind of a brave new world kind of thing to
Yeah.
figure out policies and try to stay ahead of it, keep up with it, adapt.
I think we had a robust discussion, but I have like a couple very specific changes. So I guess the question is whether we think this can be moved to a first reading. And I know we want to put together that working group. Unfortunately for you, this is going to take a while to get passed because we only have one meeting in July. So it would not, even if it goes through, even if we do a first reading in July, it wouldn't be getting adopted until the end of August. But what does the board think about moving this forward?
I mean, I think the changes are relatively minor, even though they seem like multiple things,
Right.
but they're relatively minor. We already have a lot of that in the prohibition section. It just needs to be defined. I'm fine with it moving forward as long as there's opportunity for definition altering in first read. Right?
Yeah,
Because that will be
absolutely.
new for
Yes.
us to hear how things are defined.
Yeah, I think, I totally agree, and we do have plenty of time between the first read, like, well, I guess, at that point, we'll have a little bit of extra time after the first reading, before the second reading, and then, like I said, it wouldn't be getting adopted until the end of August, so.
And then I guess I have a question just about the district work plan. Is it a requirement that a district, or that a policy gets through the 3 readings to be approved in order to establish the committee that you referenced to dig in this and prepare for the school year, or that can happen?
I mean, you've already got some of it formed.
We do, and I think that committee could continue to work. What the timing might impact is the ability for folks to sign off on the authorized use. So if we don't have an updated one, they typically do that right when everybody comes right back to school. So if we don't have the updated one, we would have to present sort of the older version of it, and then once it were approved, we'd have to get everybody to sign a second version of it, which is
Okay.
not impossible, it's just a little harder, that's all.
I think we can bring it
See what we can
for
do.
our first reading, and our second August meeting must be like August
The
15th
first
or
and the
something?
15th, I think.
16th or
15th?
something like that,
Yeah,
yeah.
right, so it should be okay.
We have a special meeting this Thursday.
But
We-
there
we're not
won't be any
gonna-
agenda items
We
on
won't
it.
have any agenda, no, this will be
Okay.
at a regular board meeting. Okay, bring forward for a first reading in July.
July.
Great,
Great,
thank you.
thank you.
Appreciate
It
it.
sounds like you've obviously both done a lot of thought, research, on this, and it's a really important topic, and I agree with President Wiedemann, it goes right into our district goals, and so it's a little bit exciting to think about, coming up with a plan for using AI productively.
It really is. It's as if we can go back and, when the internet was invented, the conversations people were having,
you
we get to
imagine?
engage in that as
Yeah.
well. So we're excited
Remember,
about
you
that.
can click on a word and the definition comes up.
Oh, it's amazing.
Wikipedia, all of our freak out about Wikipedia.
Thank you.
Thank you.
All right, moving along. Policy 607.
So this one we've seen before.
Mhm.
We had a couple things that we wanted to move around. And I think,
I didn't see that the changes.
yeah, I don't necessarily see the changes that we asked for. Oh, I'm in the wrong policy. Hold on, let me get back to it. Because I think we wanted to make it clear that this is for people who move out of the district.
Mhm.
So it's not just like someone who is a resident of another school district, but that they were a resident of this district and that they leave,
Right.
right?
Yeah, I think if, what I recall, and I know if you like read the whole thing in context, you may not come to this conclusion, but if you look at waiving tuition for seniors,
Yeah,
and then read Haverford Township will waive tuition charges for senior class students, da, 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 and it's just like, wait, what is that? What does that mean? So I think we had asked for some specificity that this was like non-resident senior students, and.
I think it was former.
for- Yeah.
It would be, will waive tuition charges for senior class students who were formerly in the district when parents or guardians of these students have registered for the school year, but have since moved out of the district. So just, yeah, to make it abundantly clear what's happening here, and the purpose is still not even really as clear as it needs to be with the move piece. Because it's really about people who were here and are now not anymore. It's not just like anyone in a different district can decide to be in ours.
Dr. Wershey, can you explain the phrase "have registered" for the school year? At what point in time would that be deemed? So like, at this point, I had a sophomore who just graduated, would it be considered at this point he's registered to be a junior? Or, so like, if you had a junior, graduated junior year, is it considered now? Or would it have to be like August when he has his class schedule? That then if we moved, we could be, like, I think this is still really vague, and so I'm
Tend
just
to look
curious,
at
like,
it as-
what that means.
We tend to look at it as July 1.
As
because
July
That's when
1.
the next school year
Okay.
begins. So if you're, the example you gave, the child just finished sophomore year, that child.
We'll stick with junior year, so it's
Or
senior,
ju-
sorry,
okay.
so like, just completed junior year, July 1
One.
before senior year. Could we say July 1?
I think, yes, specifying that.
Yeah,
Because
if
I
that's
think
what the
that just
rule
is
is.
important.
Right. I think we
Yeah.
had talked about like just specifying that somebody needs to reach out to the registrar and explain that they've moved and request this waiver that they may be eligible for or would be eligible for as long as they had previously had a full year of residency within the township. This wasn't a comment from the last committee, but when I looked at it again, is this a reason to do a residency re-verification prior to senior year? I know we have it now at points of moving from 5th grade to 6th grade and 8th grade to 9th grade.
Now, the policy itself is a policy that governs tuition, when tuition would be charged. The waiving of the tuition for seniors is a piece that was added because, as we said, if someone moved and the child is going into their senior year.
It's hard to leave your senior year.
It's hard to leave your senior year. So that's the accommodation. So I would, it only becomes necessary when that move happens. So to say we'll do residency verification for another 500 students when
Yeah,
this doesn't usually happen, I think.
So,
We've had one in the 9 years that I've been here.
but I guess the question here that does still leave a little bit is, okay, say they moved in May, but didn't inform the school district, so they went ahead and were registered. Do you know what I mean? I think making this as specific as possible is going to help us if there is a case that comes to the situation. So like, do they need to have been, they completed the year, but did they have to live here? I don't know. I just can see this becoming complicated. Again, I know that this is about waiving the tuition fee, but it's an expensive fee. So
Oh, yeah.
it's definitely a burden for families to be able to do that. And I think it's really good for the district to provide this senior year waiver. I just wonder if we need to be really specific or not. If not being specific allows you to consider some cases by case, which.
yeah,
I'm sorry.
go ahead, Chris.
I was gonna say, is that language in 202 AR that we already have active eligibility of non-resident students? It says, applies for admission at the beginning of the school year and who will become a legal resident. No. Anyway, we do have an eligibility policy that maybe defines a time frame. Sorry.
Right, and so this would be, this policy is for those who are not eligible to receive district education, right? And so, and when you're not eligible to receive our district education, that's when you would be paying us tuition. And then it's another layer on that, well, you're not eligible and you're supposed to be paying tuition, but then for seniors in this certain circumstance, we won't charge you tuition.
Right.
It's like iterative.
And that language is actually in 202 AR, the exact verbatim on the senior, waiving the tuition for seniors already.
Dr. Sheldon, did you just say that there's an AR?
It's a different, he's looking at a different
He's
policy.
looked at-
Oh, okay,
Policy.
okay, sorry, I was confused.
202 on eligibility.
Got it.
of students.
We have an active 202 AR, and the title's eligibility of non-resident students. And
Yeah.
in there's a waiving site tuition for seniors, and it's exactly verbatim.
Yeah, we added this, that was one of the revisions that we were making to policy 607, to add the language about
So
the
there was
waiving,
consistency.
so it was consistent with that policy.
So then I do think, and we said this last time, the third paragraph under waiving tuition for seniors about tuition income being promptly deposited into the appropriate bank account, that shouldn't be in that section because that section's about not paying tuition.
Right, I think that belongs up as maybe the
So-
final guideline paragraph.
Yeah, so that third paragraph that starts tuition income should be moved out of that section.
Dr. Rushi, out of curiosity, again, I know you're not going to have an exact number, but how often are you having to calculate tuition rates for people? How often are people wanting to stay in the district after moving and wanting to calculate how that costs?
Tony, I don't, I've not been requested to do that with the exception of one this year. Now, I know in residency investigations, that's calculated and put into communication. But I don't know if there are people who are really considering paying the tuition, how often that request comes
Right,
across.
I have not had it often, but PDE does certify tuition rates, so each May they come out with an elementary and secondary rate, so we would have that as a source if someone did ask, but yeah, we haven't had any requests in the business office.
Okay. So this is something that, at least at this point, is a very small case situation. For that reason, I'm curious, like, I really think that it's important to have this waiver for seniors. I'm curious for other students at like the end of the year, if they're moving, in April.
We have another policy, Dr. McKay, sorry to cut you
No,
off, but we have
that's
another
fine.
policy where if it's within the last 6 weeks of the school year, or I don't know exactly what the number is, where they can remain.
Can we have that either referenced here or like that's also part of this? Because I think that having those things be clear together, because if I was reading this policy and say I had a fourth grader, I would think I'd have to pay tuition if I didn't know that there was another policy that said that the last 6 weeks I can continue to have my student. So I think just having that either referenced here or explained like you did for the 2021 would be helpful.
So I imagine we would want this last paragraph to apply for them as well, that the guardian must assume charges related to transportation or lodging, right? And so we want them to both apply.
It's almost like having a subsection that's the waiving tuition for remaining 6 weeks of the school year, or something like that.
And so the case where this most often would apply is somebody saying they are going to establish residency within 90 days, and then they are billed for that period of time until they establish residency. Is that what this is? The assessment of tuition to non-resident students who expect to establish residency within 90 days in accordance with board policy shall be calculated, collected, and administered with policy
Oh,
202.
I'm sorry, I was on the waiver.
Oh, yeah, so this is not a waiver, this is when. the
Other
instances-
paragraph.
What am I
We
gonna?
do charge, we would charge tuition if somebody's saying, we're moving in, we'd like to get started in the school year or, sooner. So we would charge until they can establish residency for up to 90 days. But if somebody moves out at the end of the school year, we wouldn't charge tuition, okay?
So with that 90-day one, I'm just trying to like figure out the scenario with that and considering what people have to submit. If someone's purchased a home, but they haven't fully moved in yet, that can still establish residency, right? I mean, so I'm trying to think it's just more someone being like, we want to buy a home in Haverford
Yeah,
Township.
we're
We're
in
not
the-
sure when we will,
Yeah.
but we want to.
We're in the process, we don't have all the final paperwork.
Could be
It's
like-
the start of the school year, we know we're going to be here. We'd
Okay.
like the children to start here.
Got it.
You sign a contract for a house on August 31st, but the closing isn't until November 1st.
Yeah.
So like you don't technically own that house yet.
Yeah,
But you know you're about to and you wanna,
Yeah.
yeah.
okay.
So we had a lot of the same revisions that we had last time. But I think we can move this forward, just making sure that all of
Yes.
our revisions this time get made into the next one. We're gonna move that paragraph that starts tuition income.
Yeah, we'll look at that. I'm sorry, I had more of the discussion about, students with IEPs and, looking at, do we define it as the end of the academic year or the day of graduation? I had a lot.
We did have that
of
Right.
conversation
notes.
about the
And, yeah.
terminal year of
Right.
their education as opposed to just saying it's 12th grade.
Yeah.
Right, their graduation year, right?
Yeah, and we cannot do that. We've been advised to just
Okay.
leave it as, to continue enrollment through to the day of graduation.
Day of graduation, okay.
Why did we take out potential exceptions or waivers that we can give when there's an IEP involved? Did you say that that's language that was?
Oh, no, a question was asked, like students who are with us beyond their
Their senior year,
traditional
got it.
senior year, how do we look at that?
Okay,
And we define it by the day of their graduation.
okay. But they could still be eligible, they would just have to pay tuition? Or they would not be eligible at all? Just trying to figure out where that
They
would
would
be.
not be eligible.
Okay. But that language is not currently in the policy.
That's correct.
Do we need
That's-
to have that in the policy somewhere?
Justin, if you can. We advise not to do that, because there are so many different scenarios that
Okay.
have children with us. But everyone does have a day of graduation. It may be different.
Okay.
Not the day itself, the year may differ, but everyone has a point at which they are considered graduated.
Okay.
And that is known for a student, right, what their plan is, so it wouldn't be like,
It's not a surprise.
right, that, oh, we think this year it's graduation, oh, now it's next year and next year, like, there's no continuing vagueness under what's eligible for this, okay.
Okay. I think we'll move that one to a first reading as well.
Yep. Bless you.
So just continuing in order. 609, investments. And, the first thing I noticed is just that a lot has been added. So where does this all come from? And are we looking at a sample for this or we're sort
Yes.
of, okay.
So,
And
this,
how much of it is from like a PSBA sample and how much is it from like what we're already doing?
so it's, almost all of the additions are from the PSBA model. Your original version was adopted in 2010. And since 2010, there was Act 10 of 2016 was passed, that expanded the list of, permissible investments for public entities. So a lot of the language, kind of tracks what we've done in other policies, specifically in the 600 series, where a lot of it looks like it's taken directly out of statute or code, and that's because it is. So that's primarily where everything that you're seeing that's been added is coming from.
I had a couple of comments on this one. One is, and this is probably picked up from sample language, there is references throughout to a director of business affairs, which
rather
is
than-
not a business manager
Not the term that we
terminology
use.
that we use. Under delegation of responsibility, it talks about shall report monthly to the board about the amount of funds invested, the interest earned and received, types and amounts of each investment, and I wondered if monthly is a state requirement, or if that is a recommendation from the business office that the board gets this level of detail on a monthly basis.
It's required. I know it's something that in my previous district, it would just be part of our board report. So kind of like you get the bill list, it was just part of that. Or it would be something in your finance and facilities meeting as an informational item, just that we would include.
Okay, because.
So we can do that going forward.
Right, we've
based on
not
this.
been getting that kind of a report, but if it's good practice and recommended, then just wanted to flag that was in here as a policy item. The policy defined a couple of times the LGIPs, which could maybe just cleaned up. But is the reading of this, I interpreted to essentially be like the LGIPs, and is there a way, like, is there another, do you say LGIP? I don't know what I remember we had pligots when we were doing other, right, is the pligot, is that an LGIP? I don't know.
It says local government investment pool, so it would be like a pligot or a PISLAP, which is Pennsylvania School District.
Okay. And is it correct that when I read through this, it seemed like essentially the guidance was that the LGIPs are the most recommended path, or this is
Secure
kind of where the
path.
policy is directing to that type of investment?
Right, with
Okay.
the appropriate collateralization, because school districts have to have that extra level of collateralization.
Okay.
Because they are public funds.
So then, yeah, there was a place where it talked about some exceptions to, we may make exceptions to the district's investment program. And that sounded like one, I didn't know what the district's investment program was, that wasn't defined, and why under what circumstances we would need to make exceptions. I don't know if you have context. It's under the management of investments.
I can speak to
Yeah.
that somewhat. So that term, investment plan, is one of,
Or investment program.
or,
is what
I'm
it
sorry,
says here, yeah.
investment program. It's terminology that comes out of a section of the school code. So I think in application, it's really just district investments. It's not necessarily although that's the terminology used within the school code.
It's not like you went to a financial advisor
Right.
to say
Okay.
how to best invest your money. Would that be fair?
So the investment program is this structure that's permitted by law?
It more or less it's referring to your investments.
Okay. But then you'd make I guess I just didn't know under what circumstances we would be looking to make exceptions to that. Like maybe the school code gives us permission to make exceptions, and we wanted to make sure our policy didn't restrict some permissions that we have, but I was just curious, does that come up currently? Is that something that we would be looking to do?
Something that I've encountered where we had a need to make an exception, or PD has issued something that conflicts.
Okay. So generally, this is, and what I recall from a couple of years on the board is that the school district, because of the way the real estate taxes are paid, gets a influx of cash at the beginning of the school year, and then instead of just keeping millions of dollars in a savings account, can structure investments that are secured and approved for government purposes and have a time duration to generate additional return for the district, but be liquid and available as costs are budgeted and needed throughout the year. So we might do 30-day, 60-day, 90-day, 6 months, whatever, and kind of have those tranches of investments so that those funds are available, but being productive for the district.
Yes.
This is all consistent with that, right?
That process, and especially knowing.
It's kind of a
that-
dense policy, but just wanted to put it in some.
Right,
some
and especially
context.
knowing when that inflow is going to start to taper off, so we, time it so it kind of meets schedule.
I had a question on the LGIPs, or maybe public.
For some reason it's Pliget, even though that doesn't make any sense.
There's a couple of places where there's exceptions, like you can buy bonds that are not rated, at the same rate. You can also go around this collateralization. I just wonder what the purpose of that is and why I wouldn't recommend that we.
Right, that was my question too, like why would we be making exceptions?
Okay. Do we invest in LGIPs?
So we do have eligible.
Okay,
So those are the
I'm new to the
standard
whole-
investment tool for governments.
okay.
We haven't had a case where they've said, well, we have this investment if you want to make an exception to what you traditionally follow.
Okay. Those are the exceptions you were talking about. Okay, thank you.
I don't actually have that we have any revisions, just questions.
Well, to change director of business
Direct-
affairs.
Oh, is that, and so can we do that? That's okay to do?
I
or-
will get that done.
Okay, I just mean, because sometimes it's like, that's a weird code thing. and
No,
it's- Okay.
it's not. That's a mistake on my end.
Okay,
And one thing I also wanted to highlight for you all, and obviously this is already the practice of the district, but with all the addition of the terminology and different nuances of the laws that have been incorporated in this, one of the other things that was added, and it's at the very bottom, but all of this is subject to review annually by the auditors. So I think that's also a really critical component to keep in mind is that, as there's a lot of financial nuances, it is all still being reviewed at the end of the day by Mr. Testa's office in conjunction with the auditors. So I just wanted to make that point as well.
Yeah, I appreciated that other set of eyes and confirmation from the audit process. And yeah, with the purpose, putting out the investment priorities being legality, safety, liquidity, and yield, I think that is an appropriate framework. And we were talking about the guide rails in other policy that provides that same set of expectations for the ways that we can use our balance sheet and liquidity to make sure that funds are available when we need them, but when there's an opportunity to generate some return from that, that's just a good financial management practice to put that to good use.
so I think with just that one change, we'll move this to a first reading.
Yep.
All right, and so moving on to 610 procurement. And I see that it's a proposed consolidation of 610 through 613. Can you just let us know what those were? I guess I'm seeing, are they all just reproduced here, or?
Yes, so, I apologize to the committee, it's somewhat confusing. So this is a consolidation, or proposed consolidation of 610, which was, which is currently purchases subject to bid, 611 purchases budgeted, 612 purchases not budgeted, and 613 cooperative purchasing. So the more recent PSBA recommendation is to consolidate these into a single purchasing policy, if you will. Mr. Testa and I talked about doing this a couple months ago, and we ended up making those adjustments and then separating it out into just a policy and an AR. Again, a lot of this is really driven by code. So either the school code or the Pennsylvania Procurement Code. And so some of it, you know, with regard to what the bid thresholds are changing every year. So that's something that's probably more appropriate in the AR, since it's going to be moving year to year. And then we put that all together in a single comprehensive policy, which is slimmed down an awful lot, and then kept most of the.
3 sections.
It's the last page.
It's the very, very bottom.
Kept
yeah.
most of the
Oh my God,
That's the
procedural,
yeah,
policy.
I see.
most of the procedural
But
steps are
everything
now
else
in
went
the
into
AR.
the AR.
Yeah.
So yeah, I mean, quite a consolidation there, but it reads like it makes sense. I think you know, how the purpose and authority is laid out. One thing in the delegation of responsibility in the policy, it says consistent with the guidelines below. And there's only another 2 sentences, so or maybe a sentence and a half. I don't think those are the guidelines, so I'm not sure what that consistent with the guidelines below is referencing. Maybe it was consistent with the guidelines in the AR.
That's right.
As outlined in the accompanying administrative regulation. And then it's consistent with guidelines, so maybe that should not be there.
That's my mistake. That's my mistake.
So it's,
We'll-
yeah, just a
we'll make that revision.
duplicative reference
We'll
there
make
that we
that
can
ref-
clear up.
yeah, We'll make
Okay,
that revision, I'm sorry.
not a problem. But yeah, just, I had 6 lines to look at and I found something. Does anyone have any other comments on the policy itself before we look at the AR? All right. Any comments on the AR?
I just had a typo under soliciting prices, bids, and quotations, furniture, equipment, supplies, and appliances. It refers to projectuals, which I think should be projectables. Find it. Anyway, it's just a minor typo. Maybe, I
Projectuals here.
don't know what projectuals are.
Yeah, I don't.
Maybe-
They sound dangerous.
I was thinking that's like, you know, things that could be projected or
Projections? I don't know.
projectables. Anyway,
I'm gonna Google it.
I think I already did, but there's a company called Projectuals.
Yes, there is. I don't think that's what we're referring to. It's also Portuguese. Okay. Yes, that just seems like a word that doesn't belong.
I had a comment from the start about, I appreciate that this is trying to not tie us to point-in-time dollar amounts, but it says all dollar thresholds referenced are subject to adjustment on an annual basis. Do we need to establish a baseline year, like say, this number is for 2024, so that if you're reading the policy 5 years from now, you know how many years of inflation to apply, or 8 years, like, I don't know how that works.
No, the actual values are issued each year, and they're publicly available on the DOL website. So They would,
Okay,
So people aren't doing their own math.
no, it's not like a calculation that needs to be performed.
all right, I think that's what I read, it, are subject to adjustment on an annual basis. I thought that was saying the reader must,
Yeah, maybe we add who the actor is there, like by whom, who's doing the adjusting? What organization is it?
it does say that there, as determined by Department of Labor and Industry.
Okay.
Should we put a link to that website? I don't know if that would-
Or maybe
Links just go
to,
bad.
maybe instead of being subject to adjustment to, I don't know if it helps, but like, when I read the subject to adjustment, I thought that meant we were gonna look at the, what I forgot, it was like $12,800, and somebody was gonna need to apply annually a inflation CPI index.
And to actually do the
And
calculation.
do the calculation, but if that's not the case, then it's, maybe it's to say that, yeah, the, Department of Labor and Industry will update it annually and to look at any point in time to that link to make sure that you're looking at the right year.
I think it's usually every January 1 that they have that update.
Okay. Under general purchasing procedures, the first line talks about, the board expects the administration to make every effort to receive the full value for dollars spent through sound purchasing procedures. The purchasing function shall be to buy the product required for the intended purpose, which in course of its use and time will be the most economical and efficient product. And this, for me, raised a question around some of the conversations that we've been having around making decisions for environmental sustainability and efficiency. And I'm not sure the most economical and efficient there, like, if it's clear what that means. I'm thinking it's efficient in terms of dollars and cents, not environmentally, but just wanted to.
Could we say in accordance with our policies?
I think
Because we
that's
have
it.
a policy on that now, right?
That might
And
give
so,
some room to layer in another value proposition.
yeah, so if we'll add, will be the most economical and efficient product in accordance with the district's policies or the board's, I don't know how we refer to them.
Would be a good way to do it. The section on soliciting prices, construction, reconstruction, repairs, maintenance on work and school, this is bids and quotations. It says, the fourth paragraph says, the board may authorize district maintenance personnel to perform construction, reconstruction, repairs, or work having a total cost or value of less than $12,600. And that struck me, I wasn't sure how that applied to when our own crews do work around the district in the summer, which I would suspect it has a value of more than $12,600 in some instances, like how does that covered? Like if we, if this is under bids and quotes, but we do work up to 12,600.
Or is it different when it's a third party? Because this is about a contract. What do you mean?
I guess I'm not clear. So this is saying we solicit bids. I thought this was an exception, that we don't have to go to bid if the work is less than 12,600. But
I guess it depends on like, is this a new contract? You know what I mean? So like, I don't know if JR gets new contracts every summer for what he's doing.
So what I'll say is the analysis under the procurement laws, it's very factually specific by project. So, and I don't know what specific project or projects are being referenced, but just kind of generally speaking, the rule is that if it's in-house for this type of a project, and that's what the cost is going to come out, or the projected cost will be, then you're able to perform that with your own folks
okay.
in-house.
So I guess my question is, have we seen cases, or maybe the projects are just defined this way? Like if they are putting in walls to reconfigure classrooms over the summer. And one might guess that that costs more than $12,600 to do it. What happens then?
Well, that, tell me if I'm wrong. If that work were being done at Coopertown, that's one project.
Mm-hmm.
If the work were being done at the high school, that's another
Right.
project.
So the work that our crews do is in projects that are less than $12,600,
Yes.
even if there's hundreds of thousands of work going on around the district over the summer, it's because
Our
it's a
guys
budget
usually aren't
project.
doing that, yeah, they're usually not doing that more costly work.
Okay,
Yeah, like most of the time, when JR comes and talks about the summer projects, most of that, our staff have managed,
okay.
they've not actually done that work.
Good. And just, I suspect this comes from policy, or from some other like statute or something, but I was enjoying reading about under soliciting prices, the items that are exempt. And apparently we can just, at our discretion, buy maps, globes, educational films, film strips, transparencies and slides, which sounds a little antiquated, but it's always kind of fun to see those things that come from code.
Just had tapes.
Yeah.
The school code has a way of doing that, and actually, I mean,
Flannel board materials.
That's a good one.
Yeah. So yeah, sometimes it's fun to read the policies and see what you might discover.
That's where projectiles are, which maybe used to be a
Oh.
thing.
Projectables from it, like a transparency, a slide.
Yeah, right.
Does it say
Oh.
projection?
It says, yeah, projectuals.
we did buy my 4-year-old flashcards this past weekend, so
And you could have
Flashcards
spent
are-
any
they're
Any
still
amount of
alive,
money
they're
you
still
wanted.
alive and well.
They're alive. I would love to see what flannel board materials are. What's a flannel board material?
It's like a little
Like a sticky board.
sticky
right?
board, right, yeah, you
The
can
cloth, the
put
cloth
up
will stick
numbers
to
and
the board.
shapes.
Oh,
Both things have flannel, so like the
They-
things you put on it have flannel.
It's like a
They
Velcro
attach
kind of
that
thing.
way.
I'm gonna Google this.
It was a big educational tool in the 70s and 80s.
I wasn't there.
And lives on and
Some of us lived through that, so.
Sorry, guys. My millennial showing through. I can get a whole box for it, okay.
I think that one can come.
Yeah. We have a couple of things. I think adding the in accordance with board policy after economical and efficient product to the ARs is the biggest one.
And then clarifying the note at the beginning about how these prices are adjusted, that that's not something
Right,
that
the
we
values,
do.
right. So just sort of maybe changing it to have a present actor, so like the PA Department of Labor will update it instead of it will be updated, like in the passive voice. I think it'll be easier if we just switch the sentence structure. I think that's pretty much it, and we didn't have any on the very long policy.
Well, yeah,
Well, just
we'll
the one
look at
about the
that
guidelines
yeah,
below.
consistent
The
with
guidelines,
below.
right, but there are none. So striking the words consistent with the
Yes.
guidelines below.
I think that solves it.
Okay. Well, moving on. To 614, payroll authorization.
So these are extremely minor revisions. Again, this is a 2010 policy for the district, incorporating some suggested revisions from the more recent PSBA models. One of the updates was just an incorporation of the different policies that are triggered through the payroll process.
I had a question I sent by email, but paychecks, does that terminology cover electronic deposit? Is that something-
That's a good question. I wondered, like, it doesn't feel like it's all that updated when we're talking about employees who furnish stamped addressed envelopes can get a check mailed to them, or, yeah, shall receive paychecks.
I
Is
think
that,
probably that last line can go where it says summer payroll, where they have to give us addressed envelopes. I don't think we require employees to do that.
sounded a little
Okay.
antiquated.
Summer payroll line can be stricken.
And that, but to, Dr. Shelton's question about shall receive paychecks, like, does everybody actually get a paper check, or do we do debits into accounts?
I think there's a few that actually get a paper check, but the majority, I would say 99% get an electronic deposit and an electronic stub. So we don't, if you have direct deposit, you don't get a stub mailed to you, it's electronic. You can go onto the portal. So really, it probably should be more leaning towards electronic deposit in the.
And so maybe just to reflect that in this language, because it reads with a focus on paper documentation or paper processing. And so one of the changes to this policy was to delete the language about the pay schedule. Is there a reason that was removed? Like the cadence of payroll?
So the last sentence, the bi-weekly basis on alternate Fridays, is that not what happens anymore, or?
On this last one?
Right, what's stricken is all payroll checks will be distributed on a bi-weekly basis, alternate Fridays, but it wasn't replaced with something?
I mean, that's truly how we do it, it's bi-weekly.
Is there a reason why it was stricken?
Frankly, it was, if you look, I actually updated this 8 months ago. So I don't.
You don't remember?
Oh, no.
I will be completely honest with the committee. I do not recall.
Did you have a little
specifically.
baby then, or something?
Wiping stuff out.
Do we need it? Because it says, in accordance with the applicable collective bargaining agreement.
Yeah, I didn't know if there was some overriding.
Well, not everyone is in a collective bargaining agreement, though.
Yeah,
So I think we
okay.
wanted to apply beyond that. I think if this is how we do it, we should just leave it in.
I'm wondering, Tony, if I'm reading this, that a 10-month employee can be paid on a 26 pay basis.
Right.
We can't do that.
Right.
We can't, because they're on timesheets. That's why.
That's
That's
why.
Okay, got it. Mystery solved.
Okay. And there's not a reason in policy to talk about the cadence of payroll.
Seems like
That's
an
right,
AR thing
administrative
anyway.
Prerogative there. Yep.
Okay,
Okay.
leave that
I think
out.
as Dr. Shelton mentioned, that pursuant to a pre-approved schedule in accordance with any bargaining agreement that exists.
Mhm.
Or contract, maybe.
Yeah. We have some at-will employees though, right?
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, so.
So then I think the only change was to kind of broaden some of the language to,
Right.
and delete some language that makes it seem like we are
Or-
working only with paper payments.
Stamps. Removing the summer payroll line and adding information about electronic deposits and electronic pay stubs.
We should be able to get that done.
Mm-hmm.
Last one. 6:15, payroll deductions. Short one.
So this is a similar reason why this is here. Again, it's a 2010 policy, and you'll note that the updates are very minimal.
Just from updates in law or practice?
It It's actually, again, that the PSBA recommended language.
I found the purpose to be not intuitive when I read it. And I think, I don't know, you had a good legal way of saying, like, the orientation, right? The board at its discretion may act on behalf of individual employees. Like, right there, I thought, well, that's weird. Why are we acting on behalf of?
It's weird.
To deduct a certain amount from the employee's paycheck, and then I'm like, what's going on?
The board
And
being
then-
an actor there is odd.
Right, and then and remit an equal amount to an agent, and then it says designated by the employee, like, to get to that point, like, I think, yeah, just the purpose feels like it's stated awkwardly. I think we are acting,
I don't think it's the board.
and it's not the board, right? But the district at an employee's request and direction is saying to make these payroll deductions. I think that would come across more clearly. And then that comes up under delegation of responsibility about the employee. It talks about the business manager may make payroll deductions from an employee's paycheck upon proper authorization, maybe again, upon employees' proper authorization. It doesn't work that way.
No, I was asking garnishments,
Yeah, that, I was about to point out.
mandated taxes.
Right, some of it's not discretionary at all, and it's required.
Okay,
So, but I think,
Half of the employee, that's awkward wording.
but it really is addressing two sets.
Two things at once?
Two-
So let's
yeah.
separate,
Right.
can we separate them out?
Sure.
Then it would just be more clear.
so I think something for clarity would help.
Because it really just, the first sentence makes it look like we're taking money from, like, the board is taking money from employees.
And I think ultimately it is the same purpose,
Mhm.
but,
So some of it is compliance with payroll and taxes, and then others are directed, like the two examples here are the
Discretionary.
dues and tax sheltered annuities.
Mhm.
Yeah, maybe just a way to kind of separate the instruction, direction, authorization.
I'm envisioning something similar to the student accident insurance, where we parsed it out and then had
Right.
kind of two headings with really a sentence or two under each one.
Right, what the district is, I don't know, required, driven to do, and then what the employee can
Can opt to do.
opt to do, yeah.
What do you think? Do you want to see that one again or go to a first reading?
I think it's so brief that
Okay.
a
We
first
can make it
reading
work.
could handle
Yeah.
if it's ready to come.
Any other thoughts or questions on them? Made it through the whole agenda.
Well, we have one
Oh.
We have one additional item, just the request to repeal a policy 610.
The one that, the
610.1.
original one.
The original 610.1 exclusive contracting by the district. And from what Justin reports back, it is no longer a PSBA recommended policy. That policy dates back to the year 2000. So not only is there no policy update provided by PSBA, but they're no longer recommending it as a policy.
And it's not a practice that we
No.
engage in.
Oh, yeah, this seems like that would make bidding really complicated.
So just better to not have the even appearance that we might engage in contracting under that provision.
Well, it's certainly nice to have fewer policies. If this is one that we don't even use, that's reason enough to not have it.
And it feels like it could get us into some complicated liability stuff, so I think it's good to.
Probably why they're not, no longer
Right.
recommending it.
Take it off the books. Okay.
So that one will go to the board for one time for a suggestion repeal. And because we vote on that. the
We
first
vote
time.
we vote to repeal it, but we made sure that there was time, like when you give your report out.
Okay,
That there's a recommendation from the administration to repeal such and such policy. We won't vote on it that night because it gives the public an opportunity to see it, and then we would vote probably July.
At the
Okay.
subsequent meeting.
right, well, it'll be in August, so yeah, so at the July meeting, when I give my report, I will,
There is a.
oh, there is a meeting next
July,
week.
June 27th.
27th.
Yes, right, so next week, when I give my report, that'll go in.
Mm-hmm.
Okay,
Which, we do have a meeting at the end of this month, correct?
Yeah, June 27th.
So then that means the first meeting in August, we could address the AI, because that would be
Yes.
3 at that point.
if
So
we're
it's-
able to get,
Well, if they're able to get it for first reading on the 27th, that might be first reading coming in July. It's still not too late for
Yeah.
it to go.
Okay, because it seemed like it would be, if we could get it for next week, that would be really great for them, right?
and if that's the only, maybe we
Because then you don't have to do it like a separate sign form or contract with
Yeah.
students. Sorry, I didn't mean to.
Some
cut
of
you
it'll
off.
need to come from them, so that's why I don't want to commit them.
Sure.
They certainly have the motivation.
Yeah.
So, if they can get it together, but I don't know.
Okay.
What's entailed.
Yeah, mull backwards because our meeting wasn't the first week of the month, so,
Yeah.
Yeah,
yes.
meeting the last fourth
Right.
Thursday or, yeah, is unusual. All right. So with that, any other information or other items for this agenda?
I'll just let the record reflect that there's no one in the audience to ask if they have public
No
comment.
public comment?
Everyone is on summer vacation, I guess.
All right, so we are adjourned. Thank you, everybody.